Hello, everybody. Welcome to my session. It's about to be poppin'. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your presence and you spending your time and energy with my session when there are also other really, really great sessions as well. I'm going over the video right now to see who's who's on the who's on the chat, and it's a lot of you, and I'm really happy, really excited. So thank you so much again for being here. So today we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence and diabetes. The reason why I'm so passionate about emotional intelligence, just like Paul said a little bit, is because of my own story. And I grew up not being told the importance of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. I grew up not even understanding that there's such a thing that even exists. And not even that, but whenever I did feel any sort of emotions, they weren't celebrated. I wasn't able to honor my emotions, experience my emotions, or anything like that. It was more so kind of like, let's wait till she's done. Let's wait till this is all over with, to continue lecturing me about getting good grades. So as life went on, that's how emotional intelligence really came into my life. And before I get started further into my story, I wanted to share this description that the guys at Slipstream came up with for me. I tend to blabble a lot, so I think they did a really great job summarizing what emotional intelligence can look like for us today. So just to go over it real quick, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions in positive ways to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. And we're here to learn about why developing emotional intelligence is important for especially life with diabetes. So I want to mention that emotional intelligence can be applied and translated into your life in however way that you can apply it to your life. But because this is a diabetic camp, we're going to talk about it, how it can apply to diabetes. But truly, I just want to let you know that it can be applied to other aspects of your life as much as you take on what you learned today and then translate it and apply it. I'm a huge believer in practicality. I don't even call myself just a motivational speaker because it's honestly not my business whether I motivate you or not. My job is to be able to give you practical tools that you can use to implement into your life, because I would rather see action than just words. But that's just me. So a little bit of my story. The reason why I said a very long story short is because my story is so long, and that's why people pay me to. I grew up in Korea, and I was born and raised there. And just like I said, I was never given the chance or the space to explore my emotions. And so that led to just me coming home with an A+ every day. And I will say that the stereotypes are true, that much of my life had so much to do with bringing A+ performance and practically nothing else. So even for an example, like even when I came out to my mother about my homosexuality, you know how it went? I told my mom that I was gay, and she said, "That's what you think about instead of studying?" And I had a 4.0. I don't know what she was talking about, but that's how Asian I am. That's how predictably Asian I am. So that's my coming out story. It ended up being an argument about me not being able to perform very well in school, even though I had a 4 4.0 average. If I do glitch a little bit, I'm sorry. I've done everything that I could to fix my internet, fix my Zoom. I've updated and upgraded everything I can, but let's also face it, everybody's on the internet right now. So if I glitch, I'm so sorry. I'm constantly trying to check the internet speed here. Anyway, so if you want to learn further about my story, the longer versions are available on Beyond Type 1, the website, in a blog form. And recently, in the beginning of May this month, they asked me to do a video to verbally express my story as well. So if you're more of a reader, you can read the blog. If you're more of a watcher and a listener, you can watch the video. But as I grew up without emotional intelligence and self-awareness, I didn't know how to take on much of the stress that was happening in my life. Very long story short, when I was 17 years old, I'm from Queens, New York. When I was 17 years old, I had to live alone for a little bit, live on my own for a little bit, because my mother got a new job down south. And as she was moving into her new home, she got a heart attack and she had to have an emergency surgery. And when she came back to New York, I was like, okay, I've lived on my own. I know how to take care of myself. So it's my turn to take care of my sick mother. Well, just a couple of months after she came back and I was preparing myself to take care of my mother, my apartment building caught fire, and it was a 5 alarm fire. So that means that it took at least 5 fire trucks to get the fire down. And I lost everything in 1 hour that day. We lost everything in 1 hour that day. So since I was 17 years old, I didn't really have a place to call home anymore, because that all happened right before I went off to college. And after that, I call it just without a homeness. I don't really like to call it homelessness, but I've been without a home. And so I had to live in shelters. I've had to live in a Days Inn motel. I've had to live in the studio apartment in Brooklyn. And then after that, when I started college, every single dorm room became my new home. And if I ever went back to New York for spring break or winter break, I would just rent out a room, or usually it was like a basement. And I always talk about this basement that I lived in with no windows. And just so anybody knows, don't ever live in a basement with no windows. That was one of the darkest moments in my life. I grew up with depression and suicidal attempts all of my life. So thoughts all of my life. So that basement became a really dark place for me to be in. But I had no choice. That was the place that I was living at the time. And, after that sophomore year, it was the end of freshman year that I was diagnosed with diabetes. And every time, diabetes just came at a really bad point in my life. Not saying that diabetes is diagnosed at the most convenient time of your life ever. Not to say that, but it came at a point when I was already dealing with my mom having a heart attack, me not being able to show up for her the best way that I could because we lost our home to fire. We were experiencing like being without a home and things like that. So every time I was pricking my finger to check my blood sugar, or if I was to put a syringe into my arm or something like that, that sting that I felt, because in the beginning it hurt so much, like every single time, that sting would trigger me being so pissed off at my life. And it was like a constant reminder that basically my life wasn't it. Like my life was just, I grew up with other stories as well, but that was a constant reminder that I just was not happy in with my life. And after I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. So then further, I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot get a break. And then after that, sophomore year in my dorm room, I just kind of like looked at my supplies one day, and it was just kind of autopilot. It just kind of happened. Nothing inspired me to do it, but it just kind of happened that I used my supplies and I used my insulin to overdose. And I mean, as you can see, I'm alive today and I'm very thankful for that. But sometimes it takes humans the worst possible thing to happen for us to realize that there's got to be something that we're not understanding here. And for me, that was kind of like, there's no way that this is how I'm supposed to be going about responding to the emotions that I'm feeling. And especially when eventually my mother passed away from cancer, and I had to just kind of take on my life on my own. And when my mother passed away, I was kind of like, you know what? It took me this long for me to realize that I do only live one life. It had to take my suicide attempt for me to realize that, man, diabetes is going to be in my life forever and I need to do something about it. It took my mother passing away for me to realize that you really do live one life. And so from then on, I went through this journey of rather trying to embrace my diabetes and knowing that diabetes is going to be in my life forever as type 1. There's no cure for it for now. I would rather become friends with it and embrace it rather than constantly hate it and push it. And that's only detrimental for myself. So thankfully, when I was in college, I took this gen ed class. It wasn't even my major. It was a gen ed class that introduced me to meditating, journaling, self-awareness work, inner child work, emotional intelligence work, dialogue, communication, effective dialogue, nonviolent communication, all of these things that I'm going to be talking about today. So if it wasn't for that gen ed class, not even my major, I don't even use my major anymore, but because of that gen ed class, I'm able to do what I do now. So let's get started. Hope you guys have a pen and paper. I am super encouraging of pen and paper more so than phones, because it's scientifically proven that if you write stuff down, it registers in the brain differently. So that's why I encourage all of you to get a pen and paper. Let's get started with the practical steps. Just so you know that this is emotional intelligence like 101. This is like super simple steps. This is like 2-step right here. So it's very simple. And if you're like at the next level already, good for you. Message me later. We can dive in deeper to it. But this is just like a 101 class. So first steps to building emotional intelligence. It turns out it's quite simple in that all you have to do is to first allow your emotions. So there are people out there who try to suppress emotions. They try to, give you their own opinions about emotions, like stop crying. Why are you crying? Stop being a little, like all of that stuff. But no, it turns out that in order to build emotional intelligence and courage and strength and confidence in your own self and your level of self-awareness, you do have to get to know your emotions. You have to get to know your emotions. You have to get to know yourself. This is all about yourself. How are you going to show up better for the world if you don't even know how you can show up for your emotions? And then from there, so you just give yourself permission to experience your emotions. So if that looks like for you, because mental health is so individualized, it's so unique just for you. What works for one person might not work for the other person. That's why I'm saying that whatever it looks like for you, experience it. So if that's crying, if that's having to yell a little bit, just feel it out, experience how that emotion looks like in your life. Not saying that this is going to continue forever, but these are just the beginning steps as to like how certain emotions can affect you personally. And then from there, explore your emotions. If you are upset about something, just kind of start thinking like, where is this coming from? What is it about this that's bothering me? And the reason why I mentioned earlier about effective communication, dialogue, and nonviolent communication is because that also has to do with emotional intelligence. Because usually when people get into an argument, it's about disagreement, but it's also about a need not being filled. So it's always going to be about a need not being fulfilled. So like whenever you're frustrated, whenever you're sad, whenever you're angry, it's because a need isn't being fulfilled, a need isn't being satisfied. So like, where is this coming from? What need isn't being fulfilled right now? If somebody tells me that Justin Bieber is not that talented, I'm gonna get upset because, well, where is this coming from? Because I've been a believer. People don't believe this. I've been a believer since day one. I've been through it with him since he was peeing in a club bathroom bucket. But anyways, it's because my need is that for people to understand that he really is extremely talented. And if somebody tries to tell me otherwise, I'm going to prove with facts that that's incorrect. But to just get in the habit of asking yourself, where is this coming from? Later on, once you keep doing this, it'll become much easier, much quicker, and much more automatic. But right now, be conscious, be mindful, be intentional, constantly ask yourself, where is this coming from? Then use the emotion as an indicator. So you're not just going to stay there crying. You can cry it out as much as you want to, but you're not going to stay there crying, because now something. So now you are to experience and you're exploring where it's coming from. Then what is it telling you? So then I'm looking at emotions as an indicator. So this is where it differentiates people who are emotionally intelligent versus people who say that emotions are weak. Am I still frozen? This is really important, so I do want to be able to repeat it. Am I still frozen? No? Okay, so I will repeat it. Thank you so much. So once you allow your emotions and then you experience it, and then you explore where it's coming from, we're going to use that emotion as an indicator to do something about it. Because what differentiates people who are emotionally intelligent versus those who shame emotions is that we are emotionally intelligent, as in we are intelligent about our emotions. We're doing something about it. We understand what it means. So we're going to then use the emotion, recognizing the root cause, and also doing something about it to move forward. So if, for example, if you're in a toxic relationship, or if it's a narcissistic, like a very extreme case, because these are more obvious, but like when you see a cycle, repetitiveness of being upset, a repetitiveness of a need not being fulfilled in a relationship, that should be an indicator to tell you what are the action steps, what are the action items that can come after the emotion. Because you cannot just stay there crying the whole time, being upset about the relationship. Do something about it. You deserve to have your needs be fulfilled, so do something about it. All right, so then the end goal is to find the root cause and the need. And so at the bottom of the slide here, I also mentioned right here, Google Feelings Inventory. The feelings inventory is a part of the nonviolent communication method. And so if you just Google feelings inventory, it's going to show you a list of emotions. And it sounds silly, but the reason why I do this is because people tend to not understand that, like, sometimes you got to realize that, you know, when people say like, oh, I feel like this and I think that. But it turns out that sometimes when people say, I think that, it turns out it's actually an emotion. Or sometimes people think that I feel like, but it turns out it's actually an opinion, which is a thought. So that's why I'm saying use the feelings inventory to be more precise about the emotion that you're feeling, so that you can literally, oh, in this moment, I'm feeling this. And then from there, recognizing the needs. So needs can look like, again, I'm saying can look like because it's individualized for all of us. Needs can look like reassurance, affirmation, talking to someone who can listen, empathize, hold space. You know, you don't always have to talk to somebody who has something to say. Sometimes you just want to talk and be left alone. So you can find somebody, but that's up to you to recognize that need. That at that moment, you need to talk to somebody who would shut up and just listen. But that's up to you. So talking to somebody who can listen, empathize, hold space, reframing, adjusting self-talk. Reframing, if you're not familiar with it, I think it's a pretty important concept and a practice to implement. But reframing basically is looking at a situation and say, oh, today sucks. Today's not a good day. But then reframing it into something positive, accordingly to something that's true though. So reframing isn't lying to yourself. Reframing isn't like, no, today was a good day. But it's kind of like, well, what about it made it a good day? Even if it's just the smallest detail. Reframing is not lying to yourself. Reframing is consciously choosing to look at certain details consciously. Needs can look like seeking encouragement, support. I have a friend on here right now who I've had this conversation with, but basically, when we recognize that what she might need from her friends and family is support. And I said, have you ever communicated what kind of support you need from another person, from especially family? And she said, no. And I said, well, do you know what kind of support you actually need? Like, what does support look like for you? And then from that moment, we went over the details of what support looks like, because what support looks like for me can look differently from somebody else. That's why there's 5 love languages. To me, support can look like words of affirmation, but for somebody else, it can look like practically helping another person. So you have to then have the emotional intelligence to know what support looks like, what encouragement looks like, what affirmation, what reassurance looks like. And then you have to communicate that to the other person, because you cannot ever get mad at somebody else for not knowing what's inside your mind. Let's not be those kind of people. Let's communicate it. And then from there, finding a solution, taking practical action, committing to change. So this is the part where I said that we can use emotions as an indicator to do something about it. More practical. We're practical here. And then from there, making a request. making a request. This is where nonviolent communication can come in. That's a whole another lecture. That's why I keep talking about it, but I'm not actually giving a lecture on it. But nonviolent communication, it's step-by-step guideline to having an effective dialogue versus arguments, because arguments are not effective. They're not practical. You're gonna get nowhere. Versus being very clear about how somebody's action is making you feel, being able to relay that information to that person, making a request as to how you would rather like them to behave in a certain situation, and then having that dialogue. So then from here, you can Google the needs inventory, which then also will give you a list of what needs can look like. So if you were to look at your feelings inventory, recognize which emotions that you're feeling, and then go to the needs inventory and say, oh, I think I need this. This is what I need. This is what I need. This is what I need. It sounds immature almost. It sounds childish to be able to say, like, I'm needy, yada da. But that's because needs are like a baby. This is my favorite example because I feel like it is true though. If a baby is crying because the baby's hungry, but you trying to change their diapers, is that effective? Is the baby gonna stop crying? So then, in order to save time and energy and sanity, and applying that to our lives, if you were to recognize needs like a baby, wouldn't you want to recognize what exactly your needs are, and then going about it effectively and directly to fulfill that need? For example, when I was in high school, I went from relationship to relationship. I've dated all kinds of terrible women, not even women, I was in high school, girls who treated me terribly. But that was me allowing that to happen because I thought that's what I deserved. But anyways, I went near my senior high school. I had 3 girlfriends here. So I know there's a name and a word for that. But anyways, so I went from relationship to relationship to relationship to relationship, and it was like never enough. My heart was never full, and I just kept letting them treat me terribly, this and that and third. Well, when I went to college and took this class that I told you about, the Gen Ed class that I told you about, it turns out that the reason why I was dating girl to girl so much is because I have mommy issues. I grew up without affirmation from my mother. I grew up without love, love, mushy, cuddly love from my mother. That's why I love to be cuddled. That's why I love to be hugged by the person that I'm dating. So it turns out that I was just going around trying to fulfill this need, but it turns out that the center of it all was the love of my mother. And that's when I committed. I made like a whole New Year's resolution not to date anybody. I stayed single, and I told myself that the only relationship that I'm going to work on with a woman is with my mother. And it came to a point where I made a goal to myself that I'm going to tell my mother to her face that I love her. And that's the level of a relationship that we were at. Like I couldn't even tell my mother that I loved her to her face. And it just so turns out that that progress all happened literally right before she passed away. So this work is, you're never too early and it's never too late to start working on your emotional intelligence and self-awareness, and try to recognize, like, be brutally honest with yourself and recognize what your true needs are. It's okay to recognize those things, because when you live in bliss, you show up better for everybody else in your life too. So taking this, because we're talking about diabetes today, but like I said, you can translate it to other things in your life as well. Take what we just went over and then ask yourself, is there an area in your diabetes management or in your life that needs your attention? What is it? What would it look like for you to take care of that need? How could you look/ask for help? So for example, if I were to give you an example of my diabetes management, diabetes burnout is such a real thing for me, because I have never had an endocrinologist since my diagnosis who have been empathetically supportive. And it kind of like made me come to a point where I was like, okay, maybe all endocrinologists are just kind of like, they just want to see me for the 15 minutes or the 30 minutes. Maybe their jobs is to just look at my numbers and then tell me what to do next, versus maybe it's not their job to be empathetic with me. Like, that's the point that I came in. So I realized that the area in my diabetes management to understand my burnout, to empathize with me and to give me support was to give me empathy, give me support. And then recognizing that it just so happened that my friend Lissy is, over the years, she's become a coach, a wellness coach, and she's on this call right now. But basically she kind of like fulfilled that one thing that I was lacking. And I'm not saying that this is true for everybody else, because I'm jealous of other people whose endocrinologists are so empathetic. I have heard those stories. Good for them, but I don't have that. So having a coach has really helped, and having her support really just takes a lot of weight off of my shoulders. It's nice to have somebody else help me, keep me accountable in terms of like, okay, today is step one. Step one is to check my blood sugar. It's okay, whatever the number that comes up, because sometimes if it's too high, I get frustrated. If it's constantly low, I get frustrated. To just give myself that self-compassion and grace. So that's what that looked like for me. I don't know how it would look like for you, but in your life that can use more quality improvement, play around with it, explore that, and see what that looks like. I also wanted to talk about self-compassion just because we're talking about emotional intelligence here. And like I mentioned, the steps to emotional intelligence means to be able to experience your emotions. And from there, experiencing your emotions is very frowned upon, which then also can include self-compassion and having the grace, giving yourself the grace, the patience, the self-compassion to be able to explore your emotions and also follow up with those emotions. So I'm a big believer in self-compassion. So even though I'm a performance coach, I'm a mental coach for world champions and things like that, I believe in the power of self-compassion because I believe that burnout is real, because I believe that mental health is important. I believe that the key to success, the secret to success, I believe, is taking care of our mental health. I don't believe in this beast mode culture. I like to acknowledge the human beneath the beast mode. So whenever I work with world champions, they're out here, rah, rah, team no sleep, beast mode, rah, rah. But once I get them talking, they have so much to talk about. I'm like, you're human after all. So the misconceptions of self-compassion can look like self-pity, being self-centered, self-indulgence. It can look like weakness, excuses, lack of focus, lack of dedication, lack of motivation, shame, and embarrassment. And, you know, the culture raises us like this. Even if you were a kid and you're watching those old football movies, like Remember the Titans or something like that, you know, what's admirable and sexy is hard work, perseverance, work ethic, grind, the hustle. Those are the sexy things. And so even when you watch these football movies, it's like, oh, if you want a water break, you don't want it badly enough. If you want a water break, you're not focused. You're weak. You don't even deserve to be on this team. That's the culture. That's literally like, it's honestly, like, I can't point fingers to anybody. It's the culture that we grew up in. So the misconceptions of self-compassion, even though I consider it misconception, to some people, this is legitimate. To some people, this is true. To some people, self-compassion is weakness. Self-compassion is making excuses. And it's as if, to society standards, you must experience anxiety, depression, excess stress, burnout, and still be able to perform at a high level. Like, it's expected, like that's your medal. Exhaustion is your medal, because that's being exhausted, working so much is how you prove that you want it badly enough. That's how you can prove that you're a badass. That's how you get more followers on Instagram. It's as if exhaustion is your medal. But I'm a performance coach, so I think in longevity. I'm thinking performance until the day that we die. A lot of people, when they get to their deathbeds, that's when they're like, I wish that I spent more time with family. I wish that I didn't work so much. I wish that I didn't stress so much about this work thing. I don't wish for anybody to wait until their deathbed to realize that they could have had more quality life. I'm constantly thinking longevity. I'm constantly thinking sustainability. That's why self-compassion is important. So just like mental health, just like emotional intelligence, like we were talking about, self-compassion is also personalized. So again, this is about recognizing your need. So rest, taking a break, being honest, having a positive self-talk that can look like therapy. I'm really thankful that we live in a world today where therapy isn't like as frowned upon. People are celebrating seeing therapists now. So therapists now. It can look like forgiveness for others. People always say that forgiveness is actually for self. Setting boundaries, whatever boundaries can look like. That's another thing that you can Google, because there's actually like 4 or 5 different styles of boundaries. Choosing to leave toxic work environments, relationships, situations, things like that. But self-compassion is also personalized. Researchers are actually discovering that self-compassion is one of the most powerful sources of coping and resilience available to us. So it turns out that it's not even about focus and discipline and hustle and purpose and greatness. No, self-compassion. It's not just about resilience. It's not just about persistence. It's not just about hustle and grind. It turns out that self-compassion is one of the most powerful sources of coping and resilience available to us, which is great because self-compassion is within all of us. Self-love is within all of us. We just need to allow ourselves and give ourselves the permission to practice it. So honor your emotions daily. Acknowledge your emotions daily. Experience and explore your emotions daily. Like I said, I'm not saying that you're going to be stuck there forever. But the first steps are to be like, oh, hi, emotions. Hello, come in. Let me just open this door for you. You can come in. From then what? Like, are you here to like design redesign my house today? Are you here to clean my house today? Are you here to wreck up my house today? Like, what does it look like? What would it look like for you to welcome your emotions into your life? And before somebody else tells you that vulnerability is weakness, vulnerability is dope, first of all, humans are actually equipped in our brains to process emotions. Our brains are literally, every single one of us has this in our brains. It's literally built the way that it's built in order to process emotions. Memories are also aligned with emotions. So to tell somebody to not be so emotional is to tell them to not be human. It's 2020. That's ridiculous. So that is the end of my presentation. This is my website. This is my Instagram page. And that's my awesome logo that I love so much. From here, I will take questions via chat or however we want to move forward, because I see that all the participants' videos are closed. Okay. I guess I can start from the chats first. By the way, thank you guys so much for having patience with me in regards to any lag, any glitches. I'm doing my best.
There we go, Jiggy. Sorry, I had to wait a while for my mute button to click in there.
You're doing your best. It's okay.
So there's a lot of questions piping in here from the chat. Do you want to just read them out and sort of take control, or what would you like?
I will scan them right now, and if I feel like answering it, let's get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I have the capacity to answer the question, then I will. Mary says, I thought I knew what feelings were. Then we had a teacher's workshop on emotional intelligence after 9/11, and bam, changed my world. Isn't it so crazy how the one thing that the society tends to suppress is the one thing that can change our lives? That's why I say the secret to success is not, everybody knows the secret to success is persistence, hard work ethic, dedication. Everybody knows this. It's not a freaking secret. If you need Eric Thomas to tell you what the secret to success is, you need to read some books. Everybody knows. That's not a secret if everybody knows it. The secret is, which shouldn't be a secret, take care of your mental health. We're not going to be alive to perform without our mental health. Come on, somebody. What are the 5 love languages? But then Robin answered it. Amazing. Thank you. Lauren from Connecticut also did it. Thank you. Yes, we are all human after all. Self-compassion is so hard for me. I actually don't get too hard on myself about my diabetes, but everywhere else in my life, this is so true. Self-compassion is hard. To be honest, like, it took me years. It's self-work is years and years of work. It's not just an overnight progress. It's just not. It's so weird, but it's so hard to be nice to myself. Like, it's so easy for me to be nice and supportive and encouraging to other people. But for myself, I'm constantly like, you can do better. You need to do better. Just constantly going after this perfectionist mindset. But that's because I grew up with an Asian mother.
How do you battle everyday lows?
I see that. Just because we're in a diabetes camp, I wonder if you mean lows as in blood sugar. But I'll answer it in both ways. How do you battle the everyday lows? In terms of, I'll start with the diabetes portion first because we're in a diabetes camp. I actually experienced a lot of lows, especially as of recently. And it's because my insurance stopped I moved from San Diego to LA recently, like a few months ago. And so I had to change my insurance. And so my insurance in LA stopped covering the insulin that I used to take in San Diego. So they had to change my pharmacy had to change my insulin. It was like something Novolin R. They had to change it from like a good insulin to Novolin R or whatever. It's one of those like Walmart insulin, and everybody was like, oh, it's the same, don't worry about it, it's the same insulin, it's gonna do the same thing, whatever. But after that, I kept getting low every single night. I hadn't gotten sleep in like 3-4 months, every single night. So I was like, why am I low overnight? And I got tired. I started to gain weight because when I'm so low, I eat like a bowl full of cereal, and so started gaining weight from all the overnight snacks and stuff like that. And then I went to my new endocrinologist here, and she was like, why are you taking this? I was like, because people told me to. You would think that the people who are responsible for my health and my livelihood would tell me something like this. She's like, you will not take this insulin. No patient of mine is going to take this insulin because this insulin doesn't take effect until 3 or 4 hours later. Why did no one tell me this? No wonder I'm going low, because I'm bolusing for dinner, and then by the time I'm in bed, of course I go low. It takes 4 hours to start acting up. No one told me this. So yeah, that also translated into a low in my life because I wasn't getting any sleep. But that's also where the support system of our community really helped, because it's not just me going through this. Like, I know that I'm not alone in all the lows and the highs in diabetes. It really helped to seek empathy and support, but also like tips, because sometimes I learn a lot more from meetups than I do at an endocrinologist visit. But once we found out what was wrong and why I was getting so many lows, thankfully we were able to fix that. Lows were you gonna say something, Paul?
No, I said awesome. Sorry.
In terms of lows in life, constant self-compassion. And my girlfriend does a really good job reminding me. I need to be reminded. I know I'm doing a lecture on this, but that's how hard self-compassion is for somebody like me. I need to be reminded that I need to have a little more grace and a little more self-compassion. Sometimes I vent to my friend Lissy about, dude, my A1C after I moved to LA went up a whole point. And I worked so hard, but because of those lows, it killed me. My A1C went up a whole point, and I was so disappointed. But then she was like, Jiggy, you just moved from San Diego to LA. You did this and this and that. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Like, you just found out that you need a new insulin. Like, she went through this whole big list of why I need to have grace. And I was like, you're right. So in terms of everyday loads, like, I do need help. Even I need help sometimes too. So that really helps. What is your advice for communicating with less emotionally intelligent people who aren't willing to do this work? Oh, that's a great freaking question. Let's talk about the people who aren't willing to do this work. One, you're not responsible for other people's emotions. You are not responsible for other people's feelings. They're adults, unless you're talking about kids. Then they're not even capable of doing this work right now. But let's make it very clear that none of us are ever responsible for other people's emotions, reactions, responses, or feelings, even if what you might have done would hurt them. Sometimes we don't know what we do hurts another person unless they communicate it to us. It's their responsibility to communicate it to us. That's why nonviolent communication is so important. So communicating with less emotionally intelligent people who aren't willing to do this work. Okay, so there's two people here then. There's people who aren't willing to do it versus people who are. So then you have to recognize, one, do you have the capacity to have a conversation with this person? Or do you really have the mental and emotional capacity to have a conversation with this person? Acknowledging that you're going to have to use time and energy to explain yourself and translate how you're feeling in many different ways in order for that person to understand. Because communication isn't just about going outward, it's also about listening. And sometimes when you say something, the other person might translate it into something so completely different. Because when people receive information, they constantly try to translate it in a way they understand it. So that's what I tell some like social media influencers when they go through this whole like midlife crisis and they're
Oh, Jiggy, you sort of cut out on us there.
what was the last thing you heard? What was the last thing you heard?
There you go. Okay.
What was the last thing you heard?
Last thing I heard was you're just going into explaining. Sorry, it was about 2 minutes ago, or 2 seconds ago. You cut out
Social
like
media
5 seconds.
influencers.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. So when social media influencers go through this midlife crisis and they ask me, oh, I don't know what to post. Or, I don't know how to show up on social media. I usually say like, it doesn't matter because people are always going to, whatever you post, people are going to translate it in their own way. Even if you put it right there, it's literally right there. Some people just like for some reason miss it. But that's because information translates to like their capacity of understanding and information and knowledge. So you have to have the awareness to see if you have the capacity to explain or not, because it can get really frustrating. But also understanding that you don't owe an explanation to anybody. You don't have to. If you get paid for it, maybe. But that's also up to you. That's also the goodness out of your heart to explain yourself. Do you really truly care enough for the other person to understand, for you to invest time and effort into that? There's a book called Not Nice. It's a really thick book. It's like thicker than the Bible, I always say. It's a blue book with like a yellow smiley face on it. But the book is about the art of speaking up and being able to communicate your needs effectively. And then understanding, like, if you don't want to deal with a person who aren't willing to do the work, then you don't have to. The book was okay. It was recommended to me by a friend to have extra information for me to be able to teach people, but it doesn't apply to me because I don't have a problem speaking up because I'm from New York. But I can see how it can help other people. But there are also examples there that I don't really agree with. But I like the book because there's a lot of practical homeworks and assignments that you can do. But you can tell that the reason why he wrote this book is because he's been hurt so much by it. So some of his stories are like really ridiculous. I'm like, dude, you have so many opportunities to speak up. This is all your fault. This is all your fault. But
that actually brings us on to the next question. Are there any books or sources that you would recommend?
Yeah, so you know what? I have a book list. Man, I have books. Okay, so Not Nice. If something that you want to work on is being able to speak up. I don't want to butcher this. I'm gonna get the list up. Give me like literally 1 second.
Yeah.
If my internet allows it. Because I have a list. I do have a list. Oh, before books, I do recommend another really great documentary called Finding Joe, and it's free now for streaming on YouTube. Finding Joe is more so about your hero's journey and going after your purpose in life, but we're in quarantine, and if you need a new movie to watch, Finding Joe on YouTube. It's available for free now. You will never see another movie out there that has both Deepak Chopra and Rashida Jones in it. So if you appreciate Rashida Jones like I do, watch it. So recommended movie, recommended readings for this audience, I say not nice. There's a book called High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard. And he's one person that I really look up to because out of all the high performance and motivational speakers out there, his steps are so practical, and it also acknowledges the humanness. So he actually acknowledges the importance of self-compassion and taking a break. What methods do taking a break look like? He also talks about taking effective breaks. So a break doesn't have to mean just a day off, because it's also about what you do with that day off. So and acknowledging information overload and mental fatigue. So High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard, Power of Habit. Really interesting book. It explains that to break a habit or to create a new habit isn't just about wanting it badly enough and just do it and have that discipline to do it. But no, there's actually psychological habits, psychological methods to create new habits or break habits. It's not just about lacking discipline, because sometimes that's not even the case. It's not just because you can't break a habit or because you can't start a new habit, it doesn't mean you're not disciplined. We're literally humans with psychological steps, and this book I think is a good like 101 to that. I also recommend The Untethered Soul. It's just like a big hug to your heart. It's just a good book to read. The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. Bad bitch Brene Brown, I call her. I wouldn't be doing what I do now without her. There's a book called Life is a Verb. Not many people know about her. Patty D, something like that. I don't know how to say her last name, but Life is a Verb is a great book. And also there's a book called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. I'm reading this book right now, and it is messing me up, let me tell you. This is a really great book. I recommend anybody to read this book, because you don't have to have emotionally immature parents to read this book. It's just good to know what kind of people are out there in terms of why their behavior patterns show up the way that they do. And it helps us just understand other people better. Like, oh, Susan is being this and this way, probably because this and this and this. So I can probably go about a dialogue with her in this and this way, or ask her this and this question, or, respect and honor her behavior patterns in this and this way. Anyways, super interesting book. I highly recommend it. Yeah, those are the books.
Awesome. Any special suggestions for this weird time we're in?
Suggestions? Like what? Like what kind of suggestions? I like details, guys. So when you say suggestions, I want to know like what kind of suggestions? Like movies, shows, what?
Okay, well, in that case, we'll wait for the answer from the chat. But
okay.
Jiggy, do you have a personal mantra that you use?
Yeah. So the one thing that I'm really thinking that I should trademark this, but other than vulnerability is dope. Another thing that I say is no excellence without self-compassion. If I had my water bottle, I would show you my stickers, but I have a sticker that says no excellence without self-compassion. And that's because excellence is a lifelong journey, and it's about legacy. It's about continued greatness and excellence. And like I said, there's no part of success that will allow us to get there without self-compassion because of longevity. I don't know a champion who only wants to be champion once. I always say that. I only know champions who wants to be champion again and again and again and again. There's no way that as human beings, we can function at a high level continuously without taking any breaks or acts of self-compassion, like recovery, proper nutrition, proper sleep, things like that. And another thing is that I say one best at a time. So people say one step at a time, and a step is great. Like a step forward is always great. But the reason why I say one best at a time is because I strive to live my life where I can look back and say that I did my best always, and no matter the circumstances. Like, I mean, come on, look at my life. Like, my mom had a heart attack. She died from cancer. I have type 1 diabetes. I attempted suicide. I lived without a home since I was 17 years old. I've moved every single year of my life since I was 17 years old. That's 10 years. I'm exhausted. But on top of all of those things, like when my mother passed away, the day of her funeral, I went to the funeral, and then I took the bus to go back to school, because the way I saw it was to honor my mother was that I was going to finish college. That was the only way that I translated how to honor my mother. So in every scenario of different chapters of my life, I constantly had to show up at my best. I don't have any wiggle room to mess up. And that's just what's true for my life. So acknowledging that what your best is, your best will look differently every single day. For your best looks like today, if that means getting out of bed during these times, that's already such a big step. We're in a global pandemic. If you get out of bed, that's really great, because it's really hard. But I'm sure that if we weren't in a global pandemic, maybe your best when you were 18 or 21 or 25, I'm sure that looks differently than your best now. And that's okay, as long as we acknowledge that we're doing our best. So that's why I like to say one best at a time. It seems to be helping a lot of people when I explain what that means, so that there's no guilt factor. I don't like it when people are like, oh, yes, 5 years ago I could have done this, but now I can't. Okay, things have changed. Life has happened since 5 years ago. Have the grace to continue to move forward. When people constantly say, I'm trying to go back to this habit. I'm trying to go back to the way that I was. I'm trying to go back to waking up at 5 a.m. I'm trying to go back to eating healthy, having healthy habits. It's like, no, let's not go back. Let's acknowledge what's happened in your life thus far and move forward. So also changing that, reframing that, the word in our minds also helps, but one best at a time is the mantra.
What was it like starting your own business from a financial perspective while still managing to buy your insulin and supplies? Anybody who starts their own business, or you're an entrepreneur or something, you might know this, but yo, I ain't got money. Like, I don't make enough money to be able to afford my own insurance. That's why I have to settle with what I get, what I'm allowed to get. Like Medi-Cal, and I've been on Medi-Cal since even when I did have a job. Even when I did have a job, like a 9-to-5 job, I still had to get Medi-Cal. That's why I always had to just settle with, that's why I had to settle with a lonelier. Like, I don't have the option to explore many things. I don't have to me, I'm very grateful for what I get. I'm very grateful that I'm able to get what I can get when I can get it. Many times I had to like wait till the end of the day to Jiggy, are you there? Jiggy?
hello.
There you are. It looks like I was going to give you a high five there for a second where you paused.
Sorry. So what was the last thing I said?
You're talking about having a 9-to-5 job and that you can't afford to experiment.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, wow, that was way back. So basically I was saying that I don't have the luxury to be able to explore many other things. And that's why I have to just kind of like settle with what I'm able to get. So if I have to get Novo Lunar, an insulin that doesn't act until 3-4 hours away, that's what I have to work with. From my perspective, I'm very grateful for the supplies that I do get, that I am allowed to get. To me, being able to get help to take care of my health is luxury almost. I'm very grateful for what I do get, and there have been many times where I had to wait until the end of the day to bolus because I didn't have enough insulin left, or I didn't have enough syringes left. So I had to like wait until the end of the day or just not eat all day because I didn't have supplies left. Like there were many times that I had to do that. And then with the rise of social media, that's why I'm so thankful.
Jiggy?
Oh my God, did I freeze?
Yeah, you froze again, but
Oh.
it wasn't too long ago. We heard the rise of social media. Yeah, so I'm thankful for the rise of social media and everybody who's been able to like donate me their supplies. I mean, I've donated some supplies too, but like I'm very grateful whenever I always say this. I say it every time I do a blog, a video, whatever. I really wouldn't be alive without the community. Like the people who have supported me, given me equipment, like supplies. I wouldn't be alive without our community. So, yeah. That's how I manage. I do my best. Yeah.
Can you give us more examples of your own times when you practice self-compassion in your life?
More examples.
On the spot here, eh?
My entire life. A moment that a repetitive thing that keeps showing up in my life is the fact that I'm in constant survival mode. I function off of being in survival mode because my entire life has been survival mode. Like I've lived alone since when they say if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. I've lived in Queens, New York since I was 17 years old on my own. And you think you can survive New York when you're 17 on your own just by chilling and praying for it and just watching The Secret and wishing for things to happen? No, I had to put in the work and also have like the young persistence to do it. So I'm in constant survival mode. And because I've moved every single year, I don't ever feel like at home wherever I'm at. So I never decorate the home that I move into. Like my last apartment, it was just a desk in the living room and it was just empty in the living room. It wasn't until my girlfriend moved in with me that she started to like decorate and the little details. So I'm appreciating the little details, but I'm in constant survival mode. So like every money that I make, I have to consciously like, I don't shop because to me, money that I can use to shop can go to paying bills or paying off debt or upcoming bills. I like to like think ahead and have money set aside for upcoming bills. I don't shop. I don't freaking shop. So, so therefore the constant survival mode does take effect in like relationship decisions or financial decisions or whatever decisions. It does also take joy out of life sometimes. It's not fun to be constantly trying to survive. So it does sometimes take joy out of my life. So again, those are the moments when my girlfriend or my friends have to remind me, like, take a moment to do something for yourself, have grace and compassion for yourself. I mean, I guess that's a very vague example, but I have so many examples where I show myself self-compassion that I get tired from thinking about it. It's literally like a daily thing. So.
Well, then, any suggestions for getting past fear when you're dealing with vulnerability? I can't even talk. Vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
I'm Canadian. Can you tell?
It's about getting past fear when you're dealing with vulnerability. So just go over what we went over today. So okay, so you have this fear or what you identify as fear. It might not be fear if you look more into it. But okay, so you identify it as fear for now. What is that fear? What is the emotion that's attached to the fear? What is it about vulnerability? What emotions do you attach to vulnerability? Okay, explore that. What comes out of it is fear probably. But fear is not the root cause. Fear is the tip of the iceberg. What is under it? Those are the emotions that you might be feeling. From there, then recognize what are the needs. What has to happen for you to experience vulnerability? What has to happen? What does it look like? Are always two key questions that you can ask yourself. What has to happen and what does that look like? So what does also like rephrase dealing with vulnerability? Why, like, we don't deal with vulnerability, we experience vulnerability, we show up with vulnerability, we express with vulnerability. Dealing with vulnerability is like dealing with a speeding ticket or dealing with traffic. Like dealing with something, like vulnerability is not a bad thing, it's a positive thing. So you can rephrase that word dealing with vulnerability. So it's kind of like, okay, suggestions for getting past fear when you're showing up with vulnerability or expressing with vulnerability. But first explore the fear, because otherwise that's a very vague question, and what I say might not work for you because it's so individualized. So explore what fear looks like and is to you first, and what emotions that you associate with vulnerability. What is it about vulnerability that scares you? And then from there, like, do you need support? What kind of support? Do you have a safe space in order to show up with vulnerability? Go there, request them to hold space for you. Everything that we went over today, I think, can be practical here.
Awesome. Well, we got that other question. We got an answer to it. So any special suggestions for this weird time we live in? Here's what they are.
Okay.
Coping with what you want but can't get it, i.e. hugs from those like grandchildren, children, friends, etc.
Okay, so you've recognized that the need there is physical touch. I can't tell you how to have access to physical touch because it's not going to feel the same. Like I can tell you, oh, go hug your dog then, but it's not the same because it's not going to be your grandparents. Your grandchildren. In terms of that, I don't have an answer because what I'm hearing is that the need is physical touch and social presence. So however you can access that for now, but things right now just aren't the same. They can't be. So, but I'm sorry to hear that.
How do you suggest to take care of your mental health when it sometimes feels like nothing coping-wise is beneficial or helping at all?
Do it all. Explore it all. I know like one of the first like steps to taking care of mental health is seeing a therapist. And the first time I saw a therapist was when my mother passed away. And that was only because I was in the college, the school health department to pick up my diabetes supplies. And I saw a poster that said, oh, therapist. And I was like, oh, maybe that's something that I could try. But it didn't work for me. It didn't work the way that I needed it to. But that's the thing about life, is that so many different things can apply. Something else, that it worked for us, something that can work for us before might not work now, might work in the future. So when you don't know how to do anything, just do it all. And then figure out from there what might work for you. For me then, I didn't want a therapist. I needed time for myself. I need to figure out my own self-awareness and emotional intelligence. But it's 7 years later now, and now I'm back to seeing a therapist again. And it's okay, working okay now. So let's just say I watched a lot of Brene Brown back in the day, before people even, I actually had to study Brene Brown in college, and that was before like anybody really knew who she was. So I had to like fight and argue for vulnerability, because that was during the time when people were like, vulnerability is weakness, emotion is weakness, and I'm like, no, but okay. But yeah, just listen to how to recognize the resources that you have. Listen to podcasts, watch videos on YouTube. Oprah Vision called, and she interviews a lot of celebrities, and they talk about like how they take care of mental a lot, and every single celebrity has a different thing to say about how taking care of their mental health looks like for them. So that could be another really cool thing. If you don't know what Red Table Talk is, that's also a really great platform to just listen to other people's story and see how other people acknowledge their mental health and go about telling their stories and show up with vulnerability. So yeah, if you don't know the resources out there, you can start with like entertainment. Just watch shows on YouTube, or like Red Table Talk, or listen to podcasts, or read books. But yeah.
Well, Jiggy, I'm going to cut it off there. You have been awesome to listen to for the last hour, and I can listen to you for the rest of the day, trust me. I want to thank you, and I see a lot of people are clapping, so thank you very much. We've had a couple suggestions for you to write a book and do a podcast, you know.
The book will come out one day, and it will be a New York Times bestseller. God already told me that. God already gave me that vision. I just don't have the mental capacity to write a book right now. I'm only 27. But
Well,
thank you.
I'm already
Thank
signing
you so
up to be
much.
your first copy right there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody being here. I also see some private messages of people like actually willing to donate their own supplies. Yeah, the life is hard out here for somebody on Medi-Cal, but at the same time, like I said, like I'm extremely grateful for what I do have and what I do have access to. So I'm just trying to be as grateful as possible. So thank you guys so much.
And awesome. If they want to get a hold of you or follow you or anything, how do they do that, Jiggy?
My website is jiggyyoon.com, and my Instagram is jiggy at jiggy_yoon. It's just my name over and over and over again. And again, I want to say that if you want further details of my story, I think you talking about me writing a book, read my blog first that I did write, and it's gonna be on Beyond Type 1. I was able to join their leadership council this year, so super excited. So
Awesome. Congratulations.
thank you.
So for everybody else out there, again, thank you very much, Jiggy. This has been an awesome hour with you. Just remember that there is a survey at the end of this that you guys are going to be sent. And then there's going to be a Connected Emotion wrap up at the Banting Brew Cafe at 2:30. And that's it. So again, Jiggy, thank you so very much. And it was my honor to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you everybody for coming. Really appreciate it. Everybody stay safe.
Thanks, guys.